Hello, everyone. So, yesterday in chapter 21, we got about halfway through. It started off with Hermione revealing how she has been getting to all her classes. She's been using a time turner, so she turns it 1, 2, 3, and she can go back in time. This has been her trick, but now Dumbledore is asking her to use it to save Sirius and Buckbeak. So Harry and Hermione were able to save Buckbeak, and now they are waiting. The moment they disappeared, the tree began to move again. Seconds later, they heard footsteps quite close by. Dumbledore, McNair, Fudge, and the old committee member were making their way up to the castle. "Right after we gone down into the passage," said Hermione. "If only Dumbledore had come with us." "McNair and Fudge would have come too," said Harry bitterly. "I bet you anything Fudge would have told McNair to murder Sirius on the spot." They watched the four men climb the castle steps and disappear from view. For a few minutes the scene was deserted. Then, "Here comes Lupin," said Harry, as they saw another figure sprinting down the stone steps and hurrying towards the willow. Harry looked up at the sky. Clouds were obscuring the moon completely. They watched Lupin seize a broken branch from the ground and prod the knot on the trunk. The tree stopped fighting, and Lupin, too, disappeared into the gap in the roots. "If he'd only grabbed the cloak," said Harry. "It's just lying there." He turned to Hermione. "If I just dash out now and grab it, Snape'd never be able to get it, and—" "Harry, we mustn't be seen!" "How can you stand this?" he asked Hermione fiercely. "Just standing here and watching it happen. I'm going to grab the cloak." "Harry, no!" Hermione seized the back of Harry's robes not a moment too soon. Just then they heard a burst of song. It was Hagrid, making his way up to the castle, singing at the top of his voice and weaving slightly as he walked. A large bottle was swinging from his hands. "See," Hermione whispered. "See what would have happened? We've got to keep out of sight. No, Buckbeak!" The Hippogriff was making frantic attempts to get to Hagrid again. Harry seized his rope too, straining to hold Buckbeak back. They watched Hagrid meander tipsily up to the castle. He was gone. Buckbeak stopped fighting to get away. His head drooped sadly. Barely 2 minutes later, the castle doors flew open yet again, and Snape had come charging out of them, running towards the willow. Barely 2 minutes later, Harry's fist clenched as they watched Snape skid to a halt next to the tree, looking around. He grabbed the cloak and held it up. "Get your filthy hands off of it," Harry snarled under his breath. "Shh!" Snape seized the branch Lupin had used to freeze the tree, prodded the knot, and vanished from view as he put on the cloak. "So that's it," said Hermione quietly. "We're all down there. Now we've just got to wait until we come back up again." She took the end of Buckbeak's rope and tied it securely around the nearest tree, then sat down on the dry ground, arms around her knees. "Harry, there's something I don't understand. Why didn't the Dementors get Sirius? I remember them coming, then I think I passed out. There were so many of them." Harry sat down too. He explained what he saw, how, as the nearest Dementor had lowered its mouth to Harry's, a large silver something had come galloping across the lake and forced the Dementors to retreat. Hermione's mouth was slightly open by the time Harry had finished. "But what was it?" "There's only one thing it could have been, to make Dementors go," said Harry. "A real Patronus. A powerful one." "But who conjured it?" Harry didn't say anything. He was thinking back to the person he'd seen on the other bank of the lake. He knew who he thought it had been, but how could it have been? "Didn't you see what they looked like?" said Hermione eagerly. "Was it one of the teachers?" "No," said Harry. "He wasn't a teacher." "But it must have been a really powerful wizard to drive all those Dementors away. If the Patronus was shining so brightly, didn't it light him up? Couldn't you see?" "Yeah, I saw him," said Harry slowly, "but maybe I imagined it. I wasn't thinking straight. I passed out right afterwards." "Who do you think it was?" "I think," Harry swallowed, knowing how strange this was going to sound. "I think it was my dad." Harry glanced at Hermione and saw that her mouth was now fully open. She was gazing at him with a mixture of alarm and pity. "Harry, your dad's, well, dead," she said quietly. "I know that," said Harry quickly. "You think you saw his ghost?" "I don't know. No, he looks solid. But then, Maybe I was seeing things, said Harry, but from what I could see, it looked like him. I've got photos of him. Hermione was still looking at him as though worried about his sanity. I know it sounds mad, said Harry flatly. He turned to look at Buckbeak, who was digging his beak into the ground, apparently searching for worms. But he wasn't really watching Buckbeak. He was thinking about his father and about his three oldest friends, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. Had all four of them been out in the grounds tonight? Wormtail had reappeared this evening when everyone thought he was dead. Was it so impossible his father had done the same? Had he been seeing things across the lake? The figure had been too far away to see distinctly, yet he had felt sure for a moment before he lost consciousness. The leaves overhead rustled faintly in the breeze. The moon drifted in and out of sight behind the shifting clouds. Hermione sat with her face turned towards the willow, waiting. Then at last, after over an hour, "Here we come," Hermione whispered. She and Harry got to their feet. Buckbeak raised his head. They saw Lupin, Ron, and Pettigrew clambering awkwardly out of the hole in the roots, followed by the unconscious Snape, drifting weirdly upwards. Next came Harry, Hermione, and Black. They all began to walk towards the castle. Harry's heart was starting to beat very fast. He glanced up at the sky. At any moment now, that cloud was going to move aside and show the moon. "Harry," Hermione muttered as though she knew exactly what he was thinking, "we've got to stay put. We mustn't be seen. There's nothing we can do." "So we're just going to let Pettigrew escape all over again," said Harry quietly. "How do you expect to find a rat in the dark?" snapped Hermione. "There's nothing we can do. We came back to help Sirius. We're not supposed to do anything else." "All right." The moon slid out from behind its cloud. They saw the tiny figures across the grounds stop. Then they saw movement. "There goes Lupin," Hermione whispered. "He's transforming." "Hermione," said Harry suddenly, "we've got to move." "We mustn't. I keep telling you. Not to interfere, but Lupin's going to run into the forest, right at us." Hermione gasped. "Quickly," she moaned, dashing to untie Buckbeak. "Quick! Where are we going to go? Where are we going to hide? The Dementors will be coming at any moment." "Back to Hagrid's. It's empty now. Come on." They ran as fast as they could, Buckbeak cantering along behind them. They could hear the werewolf howling behind them. The cabin was in sight. Harry skidded to the door, wrenched it open, and Hermione and Buckbeak flashed past him. Harry threw himself in after them, bolted the door. Fang the boarhound barked loudly. "Shh, Fang, it's us," said Hermione, hurrying over and scratching his ears to quiet him. "That was really close," she said to Harry. "Yeah." Harry was looking out the window. It was much harder to see what was going on from here. Buckbeak seemed very happy to find himself back inside Hagrid's house. He lay down in front of the fire, folded his wings contentedly, and seemed ready for a good nap. "I think I'd better go outside again, said Harry slowly. "I can't see what's going on. We won't know when it's time." Hermione looked up. Her expression was suspicious. "I'm not going to try and interfere," said Harry quickly. "But if we don't see what's going on, how are we going to know when it's time to rescue Sirius?" "Well, okay then. I'll wait here with Buckbeak. But Harry, be careful. There's a werewolf out there, and Dementors." Harry stepped outside again and edged around the cabin. He could hear yelping in the distance. That meant the Dementors were closing in on Sirius. He and Hermione would be running to him at any moment. Harry started out towards the lake, his heart doing a kind of drum roll in his chest. Whoever had sent the Patronus would be appearing at any moment. For a fraction of a second he stood, irresolute, in front of Hagrid's door. "You must not be seen." But he didn't want to be seen. He wanted to do the seeing. He had to know. And there were the Dementors. They were emerging out of the darkness from every direction, gliding around the edges of the lake. They were moving away from where Harry stood, to the opposite bank. He wouldn't have to get near them. He began to run. He had no thought in his head except his father. If it was him, if it was really him, he had to know, had to find out. The lake was coming nearer and nearer, but there was no sign of anybody. On the opposite bank he could see tiny glimmers of silver, his own attempts at a Patronus. There was a bush at the very edge of the water. Harry threw himself behind it, peering desperately through the leaves. On the opposite bank the glimmers of silver were suddenly extinguished. A terrified excitement shot through him. Any moment now. "Come on," he muttered, staring about. "Where are you? Dad, come on!" But no one came. Harry raised his head to look at the circle of Dementors across the lake. One of them was lowering its hood. It was time for the rescuer to appear, but no one was coming to help this time. And then it hit him. He understood. He hadn't seen his father. He had seen himself. Harry flung himself out from behind the bush and pulled out his wand. "Expecto Patronum!" he yelled, and out of the end of his wand burst not a shapeless cloud of mist, but a blinding, dazzling silver animal. And here we have Harry's Patronus. He screwed up his eyes trying to see what it was. It looked like a horse. It was galloping silently away from him, across the black surface of the lake. He saw it lower its head and charge at the swarming Dementors. Now it was galloping around and around the black shapes on the ground, and the Dementors were falling back, scattering and retreating into the darkness. They were gone. The Patronus turned. It was cantering back towards Harry across the still surface of the water. It wasn't a horse. It wasn't a unicorn either. It was a stag. It was shining brightly as the moon above. It was coming back to him. It stopped on the bank. Its hooves made no mark on the soft ground as it stared at Harry with its large silver eyes. Slowly, it bowed its antlered head, and Harry realized. "Prongs," he whispered. But as his trembling fingertips stretched towards the creature, it vanished. Harry stood there, hands still outstretched. Then with a great leap of his heart, he heard hooves behind him. He whirled around and saw Hermione dashing towards him, dragging Buckbeak behind her. "What did you do?" she said fiercely. "You said you were only going to keep a lookout." "I just saved all of our lives," said Harry. "Get behind here, behind this bush. I'll explain." Hermione listened to what had just happened with her mouth open yet again. "Did anyone see you?" "Yes, haven't you been listening? I saw me, but I thought I was my dad. It's okay." "Harry, I can't believe it. You conjured up a Patronus that drove away all those Dementors? That was very, very advanced magic." "I knew I could do it this time," said Harry, "because I'd already done it. Does that make sense?" "I don't know. Harry, look at Snape." Together they peered around the bush and on the other bank. Snape had regained consciousness. He was conjuring stretchers and lifting the limp forms of Harry, Hermione, and Black onto them. A fourth stretcher, no doubt bearing Ron, was already floating at his side. Then, wand held out in front of him, he moved them away towards the castle. "Right, it's nearly time," said Hermione tensely, looking at her watch. "We've got about 45 minutes until Dumbledore locks the door to the hospital wing. We've got to rescue Sirius and get back into the ward before anyone realizes we're missing." They waited, watching the moving clouds reflected in the lake, while the bush next to them whispered in the breeze. Buckbeak, bored, was fretting for worms again. "Do you reckon he's up there yet?" said Harry, checking his watch. He looked up at the castle and began counting the windows to the right of the west tower. "Look," Hermione whispered. "Who's that? Someone coming back out of the castle." Harry stared through the darkness. The man was hurrying across the grounds towards one of the entrances. Something shining glinted on his belt. "McNair," said Harry. "The executioner. He's gone to get the Dementors. This is it, Hermione." Hermione put her hands on Buckbeak's back, and Harry gave her a leg up. Then he placed his foot on one of the lower branches of the bush, climbed up in front of her. He pulled Buckbeak's rope back over his neck and tied it to the other side of his collar like reins. "Ready?" he whispered to Hermione. "You better hold on to me." He nudged Buckbeak's side with his heels. Buckbeak soared straight into the dark air. Harry gripped his flanks with his knees, feeling the great wings rising powerfully beneath him. Hermione was holding Harry very tightly around his waist. He could hear her muttering, "Oh no, I don't like this. Oh, I really don't like this." Harry urged Buckbeak forwards. They were gliding quietly towards the upper floors of the castle. Harry pulled hard on the left-hand side of the rope, and Buckbeak turned. Harry was trying to count the windows flashing past. Here they are, riding Buckbeak through the sky. "Whoa," he said, pulling backwards as hard as he could. Buckbeak slowed down, and they found themselves at a stop, unless you counted the fact that they kept rising up and down several feet as he beat his wings to remain airborne. "He's there," said Harry, pointing at Sirius as they rose up beside the window. He reached out, and as Buckbeak's wing fell, he was able to tap sharply on the glass. Black looked up. Harry saw his jaw drop. He leapt from his chair, hurried to the window, and tried to open it, but it was locked. "Stand back," Hermione called to him, and she took out her wand, still gripping the back of Harry's robes with her left hand. "Alohomora!" The window sprang open. "How?" said Black weakly, staring at the hippogriff. "Get on. There's not much time," said Harry, gripping Buckbeak firmly on either side of its sleek neck to hold him steady. "You've got to get out of here. The Dementors are coming. McNair's gone to get them." Black placed a hand on either side of the window frame and heaved his head and shoulders out of it. It was very lucky he was so thin. In seconds he had managed to fling one leg over Buckbeak's back and pull himself onto the hippogriff behind Hermione. "Okay, Buckbeak, up," said Harry, shaking the rope. "Up to the tower, come on." The hippogriff gave one sweep of its mighty wings, and they were soaring upwards again, high as the top of the west tower. Buckbeak landed with a clatter on the battlements, and Harry and Hermione slid off him once more. "Sirius, you'd better go. Quick," Harry panted. "They'll reach Flitwick's office any moment. They'll find out you've gone." Buckbeak pawed the ground, tossing his head sharp. "What happened to the other boy? Ron," said Sirius urgently. "He's going to be okay. He's still out of it, but Madame Pomfrey says she'll be able to make him better. Quick, go." Black was still staring down at Harry. "How can I ever think?" "Go!" Harry and Hermione shouted together. Black wheeled Buckbeak around, facing the open sky. "We'll see each other again," he said. "You are, truly, your father's son, Harry." He squeezed Buckbeak's sides with his heels. Harry and Hermione jumped back as the enormous wings rose once more. The hippogriff took off into the air. He and his rider became smaller and smaller as Harry gazed after them. Then a cloud drifted across the moon, and they were gone. Monday, we will pick up with Chapter 22, Owl Post again. I'll see you then.